So we're here on page Yud-Ches, correct? We started to talk about the Psul of Lino yesterday, and we said that any Kodesh that has been endowed with Kedushas HaGuf L'Mizbeach is subject to Psul of Lino, but that doesn't apply to a Kli Shoretz. We had a discussion about that yesterday. It says, Yesh Mem Shenifsal B'Boker, V'yesh Shenifsal B'Shkiyas HaCham. So you can talk about two categories of Kedushas HaGuf as far as Mizbeach is concerned. On the one hand, you could have something that became possible with daybreak. Like, let's say, for example, you have something that could only be on the Mizbeach at night, and with daybreak, you can no longer put it on the Mizbeach. We could have something that could only be on the Mizbeach during the day. And when the day ends, it becomes possible. He calls it Davar Shizmano Sula Alos HaShachar, that which terminates with Alos HaShachar, Nifsal in Lon, Bisha Sha'ol HaShachar, Davar Shizmano Shipsula Mishkiyas HaChama, is Af Sha'achas Laila Poslos. In the note here, he mentions that you should look at the Gvuras Ari, and he tells you that there's a Rashi with regard to Kiyar, Kevachin Matsu, Halayla Shachas Kutz Libar, Nifslu Memav. So the Mayim and the Kiyar become possible at night. Dam, Nizrak Hadam, Vishar Vodas Hadam, V'enam Ksheros Balayla, Izman Psulina Shalayla, who B'tchila Shkiyas HaChama. Dam, for example, is Nifsal B'Shkiyas HaChama, and that's considered the Psul of Lina with regard to Dam, because there's no Zrika during the nighttime, and it becomes possible with Shkiyas HaChama. And the question here that we have to ask is, what part of Shkiyas HaChama? Does it mean as soon as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, or it's only after the sun is completely below the horizon, completely covered by the horizon? He says that Dam Nifsal B'Tchilas Shkiyas HaChama. If I'm not mistaken, that's Rabbeinu Tam. Shin and Gimel. After das Rabbeinu Tam, to l'shar dvam shkia hainu b'sofa shkia, mikol v'kol gabi zrika, a dover totally becomes possible with chilas hashkia. Basvas emes kosav, she'efshar shaladas Rabbeinu Tam, ein nifsal b'tchilas shkia, Elim Kain Shchato Kodem Chilas Hashkia. Aval Mutal Lishchot V'Lizrok Achar Tchilas Hashkia Kodem Ben Hashmosha. Shezeu Oso Yom Izeu Biyom Hakriva. That fascinating chiddush here in the name of the Sfas Emes. That Lina requires that you go from one state to another, from a state of hechsher to a state of psul. But here's a chetimtza, where according to Rabbeinu Tam Shita, the day itself goes beyond tchilas hashkia. Therefore, you can check the korban beyond tchilas hashkia. And therefore, by definition, if you can check the korban, then you can be zorek the dam of the korban. And that's after tchilas hashkia. So when we say the dam nifsal b'tchilas hashkia according to Rabbeinu Tam, that's not an absolute rule. And there may be at least one scenario that could come up in which the dam is not nifsal b'tchilas hashkia, and that would be the case where he did the shechita at the beginning of the Tchilas Hashkia. He calls it Shchato Kodem Tchilas Hashkia. Because then, he synchronizes his Shchita 1 second before Tchilas Hashkia. Let's say Tchilas Hashkia is 7 o'clock. At 6:59.9, he does the Shechita, and now he's ready for the Zrika, which is fine according to Rabbeinu Tam, because the day doesn't end till much later. And the Dam now will not become possible the Tchilas Hashkia. Now, I'm not sure in this case exactly when the Dam will become possible. I suspect it will become possible, Lina, with Sof Shkia. That would be my impression. And the drasha of the Gemara in Daf Nun Vav on the pasuk biyom ekrivo as zivcho, biyom shata zoveach ata makriv, biyom she'i ata zoveach I ata makriv. Dam kodem kabbalah. Istapku achronim in dam kodem kabbalah nifsal b'shkia saktam. So this is a suffix of a sefer called the Taras HaKodesh. And we're talking about dam before Kabbalah. Which, if I understand correctly, means he did the Shechita, and now the sun sets, but he hasn't yet been Makabel Adam. So the Psul of Lina only applies when there was a Shas Hechsher, Shas HaKosher. Now, theoretically, the Dam had a Shas HaKosher, but it was before Kabbalah. So Lamaisi, you can't be Zorik Dam without Kabbalah. Am I right? He quotes here in the footnote, the Evena Ozil, that's Rabbi Salman Nosa, Shepsul Lina Dome Baseh Lipsul Yotze. Shebo Kosav Ritva Shadam Kodu Kabbalah Ainu Nifsal Biyotze. And he wants to suggest that there's an analogy that if there's no psul of Yotze, then there's no psul of Lina. So again, the psul of Yotze, once again, only applies when the dam is kosher. But if he hasn't received it in a klishares, in order to do Kabbalah, and then he could be Zorik the dam. So there never was a Shasa kosher until the Kabbalah Saddam with klishares. Omnam, he writes, Mikol Makom Kosav Eben Ha'ozel, Shemiachar Shepsul Dam, Bishkia, Hu Psul Miyuchad, Anilman, Bibiyom Ekrivu Azivcho, Lefichach Yipasu, Af Kodem Kabbalah, Bishum Psul Zeh. Yal Kol Panim, Eino Yom Zvicha. Says, all right, I agree with you that logically there should be no psul of Lina. But I have another psul. And that is that the dam is only kosher for Yom Zvicha. And Zvicha depends on Shechita. So therefore the Shechita was on one day, and now he's going to be Zorik the dam on a different day. That he for sure can't do. So it's not the psul of Lina, because the psul of Lina only applies when the dam had a hefshel the Mizbeach, which before Kabbalah did not have. But there's another halacha that's derived from the pasuk Yom HaKrivo that the dam has to be brought on the Mizbeach the same day that there was a Zvicha. And now you can have a Zvicha on one day with a Zrikas Adam on another day. So it comes out, I think, according to the Even Ozel, that there's no psul in the cheft of the dam. The dam is kosher, but it's not Yom Zvicha. So what are you going to do with the dam? There's nothing you can do with it. You can't be Zorik the dam because the Zrika has to be on the Yom Zvicha. I wonder if if there would be an Isur Me'ila in the dam, for example. You follow? If dam is nifsal b'shkiyas acham, there's no Isur Me'ila because it's already possible. But if you're saying the dam is kosher, just I have no way of being zorik because I don't have Yom Tzvicha, then perhaps there would be an Isur Me'ila in the dam, which would mean that unlike dam puzzle, which goes down through shitim, and it goes out to the fields, and they could fertilize the fields with it. That would not apply in the case of a dam that became puzzle because it's not Yom Zvicha, because there's no psul in the Heftzah. What else do we have? It says matanos she'ein ma'akfuf kapara. Tell you the details here. I have some of my own handwriting here, but I can't make it out. Maybe. Oh, I see what he means. Right, we have in Chatos a special din of matan domim al karnos hamizbeh. And the law is that kemin shenosa matana achas shuv eina ma'akiv. So Chatchila ideally has to do 4 matanos on 4 chronos. But only one of those matanos is absolutely critical. Once again, I go back to this Eben Ozel business that we had before. It's possible that there's no psul lino, but then again, it's not Yom Zivcha, so we won't be able to do the other 3 matanos a Laila. But he doesn't tell you, what's the deal with the psul lino? Meaning lina only applies to that which is ma'akev and kapara. He's saying that there's no psul lina in that which is not ma'akev. So yeah, that's going to come up now in Shirayim. Right, we have a mitzvah of shvicha Shirayim al yisod hamizbeach, and that's also not critical in the kapara. Yerushalmi mistape. In Shvicha Shirayim Ksheira B'Layla. We're saying that those parts of the Avodah, the Avodah Saddam that aren't critical, are not subject to the psul of Lina, then maybe we can do the Shvicha at night. And this is a suffix in Yerushalmi and Yuma. And he writes that the Yerushalmi are suffix ulamanti omar shirayim ha'akfu. According to that man who says that the shirayim, shvicha shirayim is critical. Now I really don't understand why we just said that there might not be a psul of lina b'layla in a case of something that's not ma'akiv kapar, but now he's holding shirayim ma'akvin sakar. I don't know why there shouldn't be a psul lina. He says, "Kosa b'kilas Yaakov shemashma shalamandi omer emak vaday ksher b'layla." But from the Yerushalmi, you derive the conclusion that that which is not critical, for example, shirayim according to the Mandi Omer Eina Ma'akvin, would certainly not be subject to the psul of lina and Ekshera B'Layla. And la'aloch we paskin the shvichas shirayim eino matevus. L'chora gam ksher b'layla. Now he quotes a Minchas Pinov that shvichas shirayim le'achar shkia he machsheves chutz l'zman. So obviously, the Minchas Pinov understood that shirayim nifsolim b'layla after shkia. That's called chutz l'zman. So he's telling us that that shirayim nifsolim b'shkia. Does that apply even according to the Mani Omar, who holds that ein hashirayim ma'ak? All right. Now we're going to take a look at the end here on page Yutes. A murim b'chol ha'karbonos ve'evrei ha'ol efshal ha'kiram b'layla. We have a halacha, which is mentioned in the first Mishnah Shas already, that haktar seimurim is ksher b'layla. Mikomako, chaviva mitzvah b'shaita, the aim lemhamtin milahaktir ad shetefsh. So if all things are equal, we should do the haktar seimurim during the day and not wait till after night. Afilu b'Shabbos, even though if we waited until after nightfall, there's no violation of Shabbos. Nevertheless, that's not what we're going to do. So Luna Shalei Murim is Balos HaShachar. That makes sense because you could only be marked to the Murim by day or the night following the day, but not the next day. Now he quotes a Shita Mekubetzes in Tmura, Shayumailin Esaivarim Kodem Shkiyas HaCham L'Rosh HaShamizbeach Yidei Shelo Yipaslu B'Lina. Now, why is that so? Why is it necessary to circumvent the psul of lina in the case of Eivarim, since we know that there's Haktaras Eivarim even b'layla? So maybe when he says Kadesh Lo Yipas B'Lina, he doesn't mean that literally, that it's actually going to be possible, but it'll mean he'll fall into a b'di'evet situation, and l'chatchila we want to make sure that he brings the haktar seimurim before nightfall. But that's not pshat, because look at the Ritva. The Ritva says, "Im lo hischil lahaktir mivod yom, eino yachal lahaktir b'layla." Means it's a real psul of lina. So these Rishonim are maintaining that the process of Haktaras HaYimurim has to begin by day. Once you begin the process, then you can continue it into the night. But if you didn't even begin the Haktarah during the day, then there's a psul of lina on the Imurim, on the Eivarim. And he quotes the Ramchalva, who says at the beginning of Psachim, Ein hascholas haktar b'layla. Now he goes on to discuss a murim of the parim hanisrafim. Now he has the case of basar parim hanisrafim. And he says the Gemara vacillates back and forth as to whether there's a psul lina in the basar parim hanisrafim. We'd have to learn that sugya to see what's the difference between the emurim and the basar, as far as the psul lina is concerned. Zman achilas hakodshim zman psul nosa. We're talking now about basar hakodshim. which is nitan la'achila. In the case of most karbonos, it's only l'kohanim. In the case of shlomim, it's also nechal bailim. And now we have a time allotment for that achila. Once that time allotment passes, it becomes nosar. If somebody eats it, he's chayv kares. And there's a mitzvah of sreifas nosar. So in the case of Kodshim, is nechalim liyom v'layla. So on the day of that krova and the night that follows, you're allowed to eat the basar. And with halos hashachar, the night terminates and then it becomes nosar. In the case of Kodshim Kalin, we add another day, and the night afterwards, so we have the first day, the night, and the next day, and the night afterwards, the second night, it becomes nosar. What's the din of Toda, the El Nazir, the Lechem Sheboimon, the Kivsei Atzeres? They too, although they're very similar to Kodshim Kalin, nevertheless they have a time allotment of Kodshim, which is Yom V'Layla. So they will become Nosar with daybreak, Alos HaShachar, the second day, the next day. And now he quotes Machlokas Tanoim in Psachim and Peritom in Nishchat with regard to Chagigas Arbos. Do we say that you can eat it on the 14th and then the night going into the 15th? Or like Kodshim? Or should we give them 2 days, not just today and the night beyond that, but even the next day, the second day? The afle divas hasover shenecheles shnei yomim. In the case of Chagigas Arbasa, we give him like Kodshim Kalam 2 days, but modu b'chagiga she also a Pesach al shulchan shedino kidina Pesach. So when the Chagiga is put on the same table with the Korban Pesach, then we can't allow this luxury of allowing another day for Achila for the basar of the Chagiga, because he may come to eat the basar of the Pesach the next day if all the basar is on the table at the same time. Now the Zman Achila of the Korban Pesach is a machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. According to Rabbi Akiva, you can eat the Pesach the entire night, and it only becomes nosar with daybreak of the 15th. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, you can only eat the Korban Pesach until Chatzos. And now we have to address the question: would the basar Pesach become nosar after Chatzos, if you didn't eat it before Chatzos? Now we have something called Mosar Pesach. So Mosar Pesach means he dedicated this lamb for a Pesach, but it can no longer function as a kosher Korban Pesach. And that's called Pesach Sha'or Shnos. So it's after the first year, and it comes Mosar Pesach, then you can bring it as a Korban Shlomim. Some Tanoim would hold that Zman Achiloso L'shnei Yomim V'Layla Ech, like all Kodshim Kalim. And since Mosar Pesach was now reestablished as a Shlomim, it has all the dinim of Shlomim. So we give him that extra day. And yet, the other Tanoim say, no, Kitchilas Hakdesha. Even though now it has the status of Shlomim, but it's not a pure Shlomim. It's really a Pesach in the form of a Shlomim. But the real true identity is that of a Pesach, and therefore the Zman Achila is Kitchilas Hakdesha. That's Yom V'Layla. I wonder, according to Rabbi Losman and Saria, what would be the latest time for Achilas Mosar? I guess it would be Chatzos, because it's Tfilas HaKdesh. Kodshim HaNecholim and HaTorah L'Yom V'Layla Tiknu Chachamim Shelo Yeinechal Ela Ad Chatzos K'dei Laharchik Es Ha'odem Ben Aveir. First Mishnah in Shabbos. Korban Pesach L'Shitas Rabbi Akiva Shenechal Ad HaBoker Nechleku Rishonim Im Tiknu Bo Chachamim Li'ochlo Ad Chatzos. What would be the reason why the takana of Ad Chatzos would not apply Basar Pesach? And I suspect that the answer to this is that we don't want to be mafsid the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. You tell me that he has to stop eating at Chatzos, there may be Basar Pesach that he won't be able to eat. There may be individuals who won't be able to become the mitzvah achilas kazayis min Pesach. So therefore, we're not going to apply the yardstick of the Chachamim eino nechal ad Chatzos. Shitas HaRashba, he says in footnote Shin Samach Zayin bottom right, Shel Rabbi Akiva gam b'Rabbanan nechal ad haboker. The Rabbanan never would put a stumbling block and say you have to eat it before Chatzos. But the Rama writes, gam Rabbi Akiva Rabbanan yesh lochal ad Chatzos. The Shitas HaRambam is intuitively correct. The right now is on the Rash prove that this halacha doesn't apply in Pesach. Nechleku Rishonim b'korbanos bahem tiknu ad Chatzos, the avar v'lo achal ad Chatzos, immutali ochlo li'achar Chatzos b'di'evet olo. What did the Rabbanan do? Did they say that the sof zman achil is Chatzos, and now it becomes nosar? You can't eat it. Or do they say no? You have l'chatchila a mitzvah saseh to eat the korban by Chatzos, but we're not going to passel the korban after Chatzos because midoraisa you're allowed to eat the korban the entire night. So the Rabbanan instituted ad Chatzos kedei laharchik sodim min avera, but that's only l'chatchila to encourage everyone to eat the basar by Chatzos. We're not saying that b'di'evet it's possible. And as it turns out, if you take a look at the footnote here, Shin Samach Tes, this is a machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi is at the beginning of Shas, and Tosfos appears in Psachim Kuf Chof Amud Beis. So let's see. What we're up to here is man haktoras haimurim midrabbanan. Is this chaf on the other side? Oh, okay. The chaf didn't come in. That we know we have.